Hello, I'm here to share with you some ideas I have for escaping the classroom. Some ways that I've found help motivate students and develop some of those pro-social behaviours and engagement that we like. So let's get started. Okay, so why do we want to do this? We want to build social emotional skills of our students. We want to build their core literacy skills. We want to build their sense of accomplishment and ownership of learning. We want to build and extend deep learning. We want students to leave behind their inhibitions and, of course, escaping the kind of constricted boundaries of their chairs and seats in the classroom can help that. We want to foster creativity and we want to build positive behavioural habits and routines. So let's have a look at some ways we can do this. Escaping the room, number one. Okay, so this is a vacant lot that used to be opposite my school, and I'd bring students here and we'd do some writing activities. And it was a lot of fun. And I found that students, even who I taught 10 years ago, remember these excursions. And some of them, including one I just saw recently, still has the little poem she wrote on her notice board above her desk. So that's an evidence, I suppose, to show that it does meet the needs or it does inspire some students. Okay, so this is one of the, it's a student piece actually. So what I do as kind of an extra added element is I'll take a photo of the spaces, photos of the spaces that we're using. I'll put them on the class page so students can download those images and add them to their finished work in whatever form. And I do sometimes pair this with some visual literacy skills. So we'll see that in a minute. Okay, so what do we want the students to do? We want to improve their creative writing. We want to develop their ability to identify and harness the power of the five senses. And students really do love this, the new perspective that this offers. Now, of course, you're thinking, I've got ratty kids, they're not going to like to do this, but you'll be surprised at how many students who are bouncy, I call it, in the classroom actually really engage with this activity. And time again, I have students that they sit and they're silent. Sometimes it takes a while to get to that point. But once they do, I can see from their body language that they're visually relaxing. Not all, but many of them. And many students really don't want to come back into the class. They want to keep writing poetry under the tree or the creek or next to a garden or whatever space. And it really does help them to own that writing process. In terms of the writing goals, it helps them to, in their own writing, build authentic settings, including leveraging the five senses. It helps them to develop their ability to use specific detailed descriptions that hint at the world within. Helps them, because of that, to build the verisimilitude in their scenes and ground what's happening with their characters in a real and tangible setting. So I don't know about you, but I often find my students have these vague settings. He stood there. Where is there? Because the students haven't imagined in their own mind where their characters are, so they can't communicate them. And as we know, a lot of our students are living in a virtual space. So Baudrillard was right that simulacra of life through the screens is more and more a part of the experience of our students, and of course post-COVID. So getting them to break through that barrier of the screen and break through the barrier of the classroom is a really important process for them. And don't underestimate the importance of getting bums off seats and getting active. And it really does impact not just their poetry writing, but prose, discursive, persuasive writing. It absolutely empowers students. Now, if your school setting is such that or the policies are such that you absolutely can't bring your students out of the classroom with you. You can set these tasks for them to do in their bedrooms. And I'll show you an example later of a student who's done a really beautiful description of their bedroom. You can get them to do the sporting field. I often get them to do a shopping centre. That works really well because there's often a cacophony of sound and different senses. And often our students kind of walk through a space oblivious to all of those things. So getting them to unplug and engage is a really important part of that process. And you'll find that it really does invigorate not just their writing, but also their perception of the world around them. Okay, so here's the instructions that I give the students. So you can do a screen grab and use these, and I find that they work. So here's my instructions. The students trace their hands on a picture. In my school, our students have exercise books that they write in, so I get them to do that. They label each finger with a sense, and I've got the senses imaged here. You'll be writing outside, so they need something to lean on. Don't let students just bring a bit of paper because it's not going to work. No electronic devices. Now, I know some schools are stricter with their policy on this than others, but I really double check that. So I make sure all the devices are in their bags. I reassure the students I'm going to lock the classroom so that their precious bits and pieces are safe. And by doing that, it actually gives them that reassurance that you're valuing them and their things. And so, you know, that is a step forwards in their engagement. Now, the hardest is no talking. I know we're all thinking of that student who really struggles to not verbalize every thought. So, you know, you do your classroom management strategies. I always separate friends. I have, you know, things that are going to happen to the students who don't follow the rules. Maybe the next time we go outside, they don't get to do that. They'll have to do it at home. You know, there might be a note in their diary. Whatever it is that the discipline processes, you do you. But once we get going, I find that rule of no talking becomes easier because the students start to become less self-aware and more aware of their environment. So it is a process. Okay, so part of the instruction, students will be describing the look and the feel and the mood and the sound and the smell of outside. One of the things that I do to stop it being just a straight description is they talk about how their character, which is them, moves through the space. So it's the interaction of those 5 senses on them. So I have actually taken students out in light rain, and kids with glasses like me wore hats to protect their glasses, but it was actually, I got some fabulous writing from that. And the students voted. I gave them a choice and they chose to go outside and write in light drizzle, and the writing was extraordinary. So the first step with the writing the senses is the students write down nouns, just random nouns, no organisation to do with each of the senses. Then they build on those nouns, and then they add adjectives and more nouns. They might want to add a couple of verbs here and there. Then the next step when we go back to the classroom, and some students choose to do this outside, is to work on their visual imagery, their figurative imagery, such as personification or an extended motif. And then all of my classes, I get them to work it into a vignette, and then we also might do a stanza or two of a poem. One of the other things that's important for the writing is to let students know that they can own their work. So you'll know your own classes. I tell students they don't have to publish or share their whole bit of writing, but I will be expecting them to share their best 2 or 3 lines or 2 or 3 sentences. So we share that on Social Stream, which is a school box part of my school. Google Classroom, you can get them to write them up, put them around on the walls, whatever works for you. But giving students power and control and ownership over what happens to their writing is also important. I also go through and have a look at their drafts in their books to make sure that they've actually produced something. One of the interesting things I find that students learn through this process is the beauty of handwriting, their creative process. Because when you write in Word or whatever document, when you change something, the original disappears. Whereas this process, that whole layers and layers and layers of description adds on. And so students will often end up going back to their original idea and maybe reworking an idea. So that actually becomes quite an important process for them. Now, here's a couple of different examples of student writing. The one from 2018 is an example of a student who wrote about their bedroom. Okay, I'll read that one out. I choked on the stagnant air that hung thick with memories of football games and school days. Stumbling over the mad towers of books and empty food wrappers on my floor, I headed to my desk and familiar chair. I loved and hated the chair's squeaky wheel. When study got too hard, the rhythmic squeals my rocking maid entertained me while I chewed on the dry, splintered end of my pencil. My oasis was not fancy, but it was mine. So beautiful bit of writing there. Before we'd done the writing exercise outside and the student went home and did their writing in their classroom. Obviously, we've also talked about long sentences and pace and all of that. Here's a poem in the middle that was written by a student inspired by the bushfire. That's an original photo of Bilpin in 2019 after the catastrophic fires. An eerie darkness breathed through the trees, carrying a chill which rustled what little was left of charred branches. Beautiful, evocative. The one on the right veers more towards purple prose, but again, it was a really good example of this student's learning process. The trepidation of escape plays in my mouth as we beat down the hard, unforgiving stairs to grassy expanses, glistening green and gentle fresh, crying under a delicate coat of fallen tears. Over the wide ribbon of deep grey gravel, the steady, ancient trees reach their gnarled fingers expectantly to each other as they wear the promising perfume of soggy soil and leaves. My clothes draw in around me as I feel the butterfly caresses of tears on my skin. The high ringing calls of birds play in time with the rhythmic swishes of car tyres through the rain. So that's three different examples of student work. So each student has published their work, and these three, they've put them up around the classroom. So a little bit of visual design is also evident in each of these. So these are also good life skills the students have learnt. Well, that's all. I hope that's given you some ideas for your student writing. And I hope that you're able to leave the confines of the classroom